10 cents doesn't seem bad to me. Nothing I say is financial advice. However, when I talk about 20 cents, sometimes people want to talk about a different price scenario. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about maybe the idea of 10 cents when it comes to AMP. Now, if I take a look at that, let's say 10 cents, market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply around $8.5 billion, that's around a 23x from here. Some people may be thinking, okay, that market cap still at the price of 10 cents seems very massive. Well, take a look at Dogecoin reaching over 80 billion back in 2021, Shiba, that year reaching around 40 billion. This doesn't seem too outlandish to me, but even besides all that, that's around a 23x from here. Some people out there may be thinking, oh, a 23x, that's not that good and all this type of stuff. Well, the way you take a look at it is that what is Bitcoin and Ethereum going to do in the next 6 to 10 months, arguably? I don't know if they could do that. I mean, Bitcoin at 300 grand is less than a 3x from where it is as of right now, let alone Ethereum going to 10 grand is like less than a 3x from here. So the way you take a look at it is that this, to me, if someone asked me, right, AMP, Bitcoin, or Ethereum, I cannot make a decision for anyone, by the way, but in my perspective, what I would do in that personal situation is that I would choose AMP because, again, Bitcoin and Ethereum, if I got into, for instance, Bitcoin years ago, that's a totally different case. But I didn't get in like 10 years ago or something like that, So this is the way I take a look at it. I would much rather choose AMP right now for me. Not to mention, if we take a look at that market cap, again, people may be thinking, oh, around 8.5 billion seems too much and all this type of stuff. Well, right now, there's over 600 million crypto owners. When compared to the peak of the 2021 bull run, when there was around 300 million crypto owners, that's a big difference, very night and day difference in my opinion. Not to mention, we take a look at also, for instance, the hype for the Bitcoin ETF and the Ethereum ETF. Don't get me wrong. Bitcoin ETF, Ethereum ETF, I think is good for the space overall, but I would not want to get into Bitcoin or Ethereum right now. This is just my perspective. But even besides all that, when I take a look at something like AMP, people seem to think that, sure, there's more crypto owners right now, but then there's more competitors. Now, when it comes to AMP, I think that actually, in the grand scheme of things, it does have more competitors, but I don't think many of it are actually that good because a lot of these projects that are launching, right? Because there's a lot of launch pads and whatnot, people seem to be launching these random meme coins, in which case, I don't think many of them could hypothetically do well. Maybe some could, but who knows, right? So, yes, there's more competition, but is there a drastically new amount of good and viable competitors? I think not really. Of course, there's more, but not way much more, right? This is the way I view it. Now, why do I like AMP, and why do I think its amazing fundamentals could hypothetically allow for it to maybe do something during a fully fledged type of altcoin season? It's because if we take a look at the origin, or should I say the history of AMP, why was it even created? It was created because the original Flexa coin smart contract could not be upgraded to meet the new demands that Flexa was looking for. AMP was created by both Flexa, which is a crypto payments company, and as well as Consensus, which is a blockchain development enterprise. But even besides that point, shortly before AMP was launched, Flexa launched an app called SPEDN. Now, SPEDN basically allows users to pay at thousands of merchants using various cryptocurrencies. And now you may be thinking, okay, how does AMP even play a role in any of this type of stuff? Well, let me give an example. Let's say I'm using SPEDN, right? And I want to purchase something at a store. Let's say I make a purchase at this store. Now, there needs to be a way, in my opinion, for this merchant to hypothetically sort of, in a sense, be guaranteed their payment. Because if, let's say I use, some cryptocurrency, right? There's a chance the transaction may fail. Now, it's very small. And I'm going to get into as to how small the percentage is in a kind of broad view later on in the video. But even besides that point, there is still a chance because let's say there's a hard fork or like a chain halt, then let's say the transaction fails. What happens? Then the merchant doesn't get it. That's not going to be a good thing. So then AMP kind of plays a role in this. Let me explain, because let's say, when this purchase is made, right? An amount of AMP that is slightly worth more than the transaction is temporarily locked up into a special smart contract. Now, the reason why is because this does ensure basically that if the transaction fails for whatever reason, then the merchant will still get their entire payment nonetheless. Not to mention, this is also beneficial at a moment in time where, let's say, there's a bear market, or let's say the prices are going down really hard for whatever reason. let's say during the purchase, of course this merchant still wants to get their payment, right? They don't want to get like a less payment just because a cryptocurrency is going down. It wouldn't make any sense, right? Because, then that'd be like kind of a weird thing going on. But then, of course, again, this AMP that is locked up, it'll just keep ensuring that basically, whatever happens to the transaction, the merchant will quite essentially get their entire payment nonetheless. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, I'm going to harp back to the previous example that I used in terms of the percentage of failing. Because the way to take a look at it is this: why do I think the chance of that maybe failing is low? Because allegedly, from what I know, right, there has never actually been a failed transaction, at least again that I know of. So we got to just imagine that. It just seems like it's kind of low, in the grand scheme of things. Now, again, a major concern that some people may have is that, okay, if this app keeps getting locked up and then transactions keep, failing and failing, what happens? Can't the price of AMP, suddenly crash or something like that? Well, in my opinion, even if, let's say, like 10 or 100 transactions fail a day, the, grand scheme of things, I think, because AMP, the market cap isn't like that small, right? It's not a micro cap. It's not the biggest either, but I'm just saying, it just really wouldn't make such a drastic difference in the grand scheme of things. It would be kind of negligible in the whole grand scheme of things again. So then the way you take a look at it is that, first of all, I've never heard of a failed transaction. Second of all, even if a lot, started failing a day, it wouldn't really make much of a difference. Now, if it was prolonged, like let's say like it kept happening for many, many months where 90% of the transactions for whatever reason kept failing, then that's alarming. But I'm pretty sure that before something like that even happens, or let's say like for a prolonged period of time, I'm pretty sure something like Flexa or something, or Consensus or whatever the case may be, I think they would probably kind of step in and probably address the issue, right? So the way you take a look at it is that, again, I've never heard about a failed transaction, but if like many kept failing over an extended period of time, I'm pretty sure they might find a solution. So this is the way I take a look at it. But even besides all that, some people may be thinking, okay, where's this AMP coming from? Right? This like AMP that is basically acting as insurance or something like that for the transaction, like the one that is temporarily locked up, like I mentioned earlier on the video. Now, this AMP is coming from users who are staking their AMP through payment providers who are currently leveraging Flexa's payment protocol. So yeah, basically that's the whole thing when it comes to AMP. I think it's very unique. I think it's very interesting. But some people may be wondering, okay, how soon? Now, usually altcoins, as a worst case scenario, they typically peak around 1.5 years after a Bitcoin halving event. 1.5 years from the last Bitcoin halving event would actually mean around October this year. I mean, that's not a guarantee, though. I mean, that's based off history. Who knows if it's going to be the same this time around? But at least the way you take a look at it is that whether it happens at that time, in December, Q1 of next year, whatever the case may be, there's one thing that's within my control, and that's myself. I cannot control AMP. I cannot control the price. I cannot control the market. I cannot do that. I can only just control myself, so I'm going to be dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting. For a moment in time in which it hypothetically does wake up, I just want to be prepared. And that's pretty much it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I would greatly appreciate it. It's Willie the Captain. I'll catch you all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.